So welcome to this guided analysis RUAE video for Higher English. The article that this focuses on is written by Dave Grohl, who's the lead singer and guitarist of the Foo Fighters and was in Nirvana back in the day, and it's an article that he wrote in The Atlantic. So first of all, a quick reminder about what RUAE actually is. It's reading for understanding, analysis and evaluation, and it's also often referred to as close reading. There are three key skills that you need to demonstrate in RUAE. That is your understanding. Do you understand what is being written, i.e. the ideas that the writer is using? And the way you demonstrate that is by summarising or paraphrasing using your own words as far as possible. The second key skill is analysis, which is you demonstrating you understand how the writer has used language, which includes structure, to achieve a particular effect, in which you identify a particular quote which contains a language or structure feature, and then you explain the effect of that quote. And the final skill is evaluation, in which you judge how well the writer has achieved a particular purpose, and that might use ideas and that might also use language. Okay, and generally speaking, these evaluation questions are asking to look either at the introduction or the conclusion and evaluate how effectively that paragraph introduces or concludes the article. So the article that we're focusing on in this video is The Day the Live Concert Returns by Dave Grohl. You can find the article on the Atlantic's website, and there's the link there for you. Or if you just Google or search for Dave Grohl Atlantic, you should be able to find a link to that article. You can also find a text-only version that I put in SharePoint in the Higher English RUAE folder. Now, if you're going to be reading this online, I've got a top tip for you. Microsoft Edge as a browser comes with a reading view, which makes it much easier to read, and it also uses their immersive reader, so you can actually have the web browser read it out loud to you. So here is how we use the Microsoft Edge browser and its reading view in order to access the immersive reader. So first of all, we need to get ourselves to the article that we want. So we Google, or search rather, for Dave Grohl Atlantic, and here is the article that we want. Obviously, the default view for the article online is a little bit busy. There's adverts, there's pictures. It's not necessarily the easiest to read in terms of focusing on the word, and certainly it doesn't give you access to the immersive reader. So up here, we want to click on this little icon that looks a little bit like a book. That's the reading view. We click on that, and suddenly we get access to this. Much cleaner, much easier for you to read. You can, while you're in the reading view, use this little button here to add various notes and so on. There'll be a separate video to kind of show you how to do all of that. But what's particularly useful for you right now, if you're somebody who benefits from using an electronic reader or a human reader in your assessments, is you can actually use the immersive reader to read this out loud to you right now. So you right click on the page and you click read aloud, and so on and so forth. So at this point, I have to ask you to stop if you haven't read the article yet. You'll get much more out of this video if you've already read the article, if you're already familiar with the ideas and the language that's contained therein. Okay, so if you haven't read it yet, just stop the video right now, go away, read the article, and then come back and carry on once you've done so. Okay, good. Now that you've read the article, let's get on to practicing our RUAE skills. So the first step we're going to look at in this video is looking at the central concerns of the article, really getting to the heart of what the article is about, making sure that we understand at a fundamental level what the writer is actually trying to say. Now, one way of getting to the heart of what an article is about is using the strategy 5-5-1. Okay, what that means is you're going to summarize the entire article down initially into 5 sentences, and then into 5 words, and then ultimately into 1 word. Now, if you'd like to have a go at this yourself before I tell you the summaries that I kind of came up with, just pause the video right now, have a go at summarising it in 5 sentences, then 5 words, then 1 word, and then listen to mine and see if we came to the same conclusions. So here are my 5 sentences then. Because of the pandemic, proper live music performances cannot take place. The only alternative, online video streaming, is lacking in audio and visual quality, as well as the fundamental experience of live music. Seeing your favourite performers live, in the flesh, allows you to see their humanity, who they really, truly are. As a performer, Dave Grohl also sees his audience's humanity, who they are as individual people. This experience is really important, and though he doesn't know when restrictions against mass gatherings will end, he knows they will, and he's looking forward to experiencing live music again. Now, one thing I'm going to note about this, I have not included any of the anecdotes that Dave Grohl contains within his article. I've not talked about Freddie Mercury, I've not talked about Bruce Springsteen, and that's because those anecdotes, those little stories that he contains within his article, are there to help him demonstrate or illustrate or convey to the reader what his key ideas are. So I'm not summarizing the anecdotes, I'm summarizing the ideas that the anecdotes prove. Okay, so there are my 5 sentences. Now let's see how we can condense those down into 5 words. Live music, shared human experience. That to me is how best to sum up this article in just 5 words. You'll notice it's not a proper sentence, it's not grammatically coherent, but rather it's the 5 key words that I think, if said together, really get to the heart of what this article is all about. Now the next challenge then is to take these 5 words and just bring this down to just a single word. And that's tough, but that will help you get to the heart of what this article is really about. So what is the core essence of this article then? A functional word like music or live or gig might be used quite a lot throughout the article, but does it get to the heart of what the article is about? If you said this is an article that's about music or gigs, or even if I allowed you 2 words and said live music, that still isn't quite getting to the heart, to the very essence of what Dave is talking about. So I'm going to actually walk you through my thinking process here as I work my way through a few different possibilities until hopefully we get to one that we can agree on is the best single word to sum up this article. So first of all, I thought experience. Is experience the right word? And yes, he is talking about the experience of live music and live gigs and what that feels like and how important that experience is. But in and of itself, the word experience doesn't quite get to the heart of it. And if you look at Dave Grohl's horrified little face there, he clearly agrees experience is not the right word. Then I thought humanity. Is humanity the right word? Because again, he talks about our shared humanity, that we're all human, that this is something that we all crave, that we all need. And I think this is a little bit better. Again, Dave's not quite so horrified in this one, but it's still not quite right. The word humanity in and of itself doesn't really capture the essence of what this article is about. So then I came up with the word shared. Okay, this is a word that featured in my sort of 5-word summary as well. And what Dave Grohl is talking about is the shared experience that we have, our shared humanity. And I think this is close, and I think this wouldn't be too bad a word to use to kind of summarize this, but it's still not quite right. It's still not quite perfect. And then I hit on this word, connection. And to me, this word, connection, really gets to the heart of what Dave Grohl is writing about. He's writing about the way in which live music is a shared experience. It shows our shared humanity. It reveals a connection between the performers and their audience, a connection between everybody who is human and who misses live music. So for me, connection is the one word that best gets to the heart of kind of what this article is all about. Now, you may have picked a different word, okay? And do feel free to get in touch and let me know what words you came up with that you thought were better, but I'm certainly happy with connection as being one word. So that's our big ideas. On to the next stage. So our next step then is paraphrasing, okay? Is the art of taking ideas and expressing them using our own words as far as possible. So in order to demonstrate your understanding of the ideas in the extract, you need to express those ideas using your own words. Now this is really important. Simply quoting or lifting from the passage doesn't necessarily show that you understand what you are quoting. Now don't worry about every single word, okay? Simple or common words like the or table or and, they're fine, you can lift those. What's important is focus on the core idea that lies behind the word and express that in a new way. So here's a paragraph from the article, okay? And I'm going to talk through this paragraph and I want us to think about what are the experiences that Grohl had that show that he knows this feeling well, okay? So I'm going to read this paragraph through actually, and then we'll sort of talk through the key ideas. As a lifelong concert goer, I know this feeling well. I myself have been pressed against the cold front rail of an arena rock show. I have air drummed along to my favourite songs in the rafters and been crushed in the crowd, dancing to dangerous decibel levels while lost in the rhythm. I've been lifted and carried to the stage by total strangers for a glorious swan dive back into their sweaty embrace. Arm in arm, I have sung at the top of my lungs with people I may never see again, all to celebrate and share the tangible, communal power of music. Okay, so within that paragraph then, we're thinking about what are the experiences that he mentions inside this paragraph that show that he knows this feeling well. We're looking for the experiences he's had that show that he knows the feeling well. So here I've highlighted in red the most important phrases we're going to look at. Now you'll notice one thing I did straight away is I put a line through the first sentence and the last sentence of these paragraphs, because the first and last sentence have nothing to do with that question. As a lifelong concert goer, I know this feeling well. That is essentially restating what's in the question. It's telling us that he knows the feeling well, and we're looking for the evidence that supports that. So that statement is not part of our answer. And that last sentence there, all to celebrate and share the tangible communal power of music, is telling us why he's done all these things, but those are not experiences. So again, that's not relevant. So I've immediately excluded 2 irrelevant paragraphs. Then you can sort of see the other bits I've looked at, details of things that he has experienced himself: pressing against the cold front rail, air drumming along to his favourite songs, being crushed in the crowd, dancing to dangerous decibel levels while lost in the rhythm, lifted and carried to the stage by total strangers, a glorious swan dive back into their sweaty embrace, arm in arm, singing at the top of his lungs with people that he may never see again. So let's work through each of these and talk about how we might put those in our own words. So first of all, you'll see here I've got 2 distinct quotes: pressed against the cold front rail, crushed in the crowd. Really, although those are different words that Grohl has used, it's a single idea that he's expressed, okay? That he's been squashed in with lots of other fans at gigs, okay? You couldn't express this twice and hope to get 2 lots of marks for it, because really it's a single idea that he himself has expressed twice: pressed against the cold front rail, crushed in the crowd. We put that together, he's been squashed in with lots of other fans. Okay, we need the idea of him being pressed in like a sardine, okay, that he's just squeezed in, he's squashed in with lots of other fans. Next, air drummed along to my favourite songs. And again, he is mimed playing along with the band. So we're looking at air drummed along, and he's mimed playing along. You'll notice I've used the word along again, because along doesn't actually matter. It's a minor word. But if I say he's mimed playing along, you know that I understand what he means when he says he has air drummed. Okay? And then dancing to dangerous decibel levels while lost in the rhythm. Okay, so we're saying that he's got carried away dancing regardless of the loud volume. Now you'll notice there's 2 distinct points there. Okay, he's got carried away dancing is the idea of him being lost in rhythm, and regardless of the loud volume relates to dancing to dangerous decibel levels. Okay, so actually within that phrase there are 2 distinct ideas that you can express, and you would get 2 different marks. And I've included these examples just because I think it's quite important that you recognize that sometimes a writer might express the same idea more than once in a paragraph, but you're only going to get 1 mark for that because it's a single idea, where sometimes what seems like a single phrase might have 2 distinct ideas in it, and you can get credit for each of those. It really is about looking past the words to the ideas that lie behind them. So here's another example of that, of a sentence or a phrase that has 2 distinct ideas within it. Lifted and carried to the stage by total strangers for a glorious swan dive back into their sweaty embrace. Okay, 2 distinct things he's done with the crowd there. He has crowd surfed and he has stage dive. Now, you might be tempted to conflate the 2 of those together, and certainly if you did just express that as one idea, you could get a mark. But I think there are 2 separate, distinct points there for you to make, and it is worth drilling down to that precision in terms of different ideas inside the passage. Now, this next one, arm in arm, I have sung at the top of my lungs with people I may never see again, is quite interesting, because if you look at how I have paraphrased that in my own words, I've said he forged a brief, intense connection with absolute strangers. Now you'll notice that I eschewed all of the details inside there. I didn't try and take the phrase arm in arm and paraphrase that and say something about him kind of having physical contact. I didn't talk about him singing. I didn't make some discussion about him expelling air from his lungs in a musical fashion at high volume. Rather, I got to the underlying idea there that he forged a brief, intense personal connection with absolute strangers, because that, I think, is the heart, the very essence of what he's trying to say in that sentence. Okay, so that's just 1 paragraph we've gone through. We've taken some of the key ideas and summarized it. This is, of course, something that you can and should be practicing yourself. So feel free to look at some of the other paragraphs inside this article and again, try and summarize them. Perhaps look at the Bruce Springsteen paragraph, the anecdote there about Bruce Springsteen, and maybe summarize what the lesson is that he learns from Bruce Springsteen or something like that. All right, on to the next stage. And that next stage is analysing. Okay, this is the point where we're going to look at how the writer has used language and structure to convey a particular idea, or to create a particular mood, or to have a particular effect on the reader. Now, just a quick point on that, just a little reminder, those of you that come from GCSE, that in SQA terms, when we use the word language, that contains sentence structure and everything as well. So language and structure are not two separate things. Okay, so if you're looking at language, you are also looking at structure. Now, there are many, many different types of language features that you can look for inside an article, and you absolutely can get credit for analysing all manner of disparate techniques. However, the most common, and therefore probably the best to practice most regularly, are word choice, where you look for specific words and explain the connotations of those words. Imagery, where you're looking for most commonly metaphors and similes, and you need to explain what is being compared to what and why. And then lastly, sentence structure, and you might have lists which emphasize how much or how many of something is, looking at scale of variety. You might have short or minor sentences that are emphatic, that are abrupt. You might have questions which might indicate doubt or uncertainty, or might be used to engage the reader. Or you might have parallel structure or balance within your sentence structure, which might be used to imply connection between things. I'm just briefly going to relate this back to the actual kind of exam structure for you, because it is important to clearly and succinctly explain the effect of the language feature that you're analysing, to explain how it has that effect. And I really have to remind you about this, because simply identifying, oh, yep, that's a metaphor, isn't going to get you anything. You need to explain the effect of that metaphor. Okay, now the way that that breaks down in the actual exam papers, if you're sitting Nat 5, you'll get 1 mark for a quote and 1 mark for a comment. So if it's a 4-mark analysis question, half of your marks come from getting 2 correct quotations, and then your other 2 marks come from commenting on each of those quotations. If you're higher, you still have to do the quoting, but you don't get a mark for the quote, right? You only get the mark for the comment that you get. You get 1 mark for a basic comment, 2 marks for a detailed and insightful comment. And my advice, generally speaking, particularly at the start of a course, is to always assume that you're going to be getting basic comments. So if it's a 4-mark question, assume you need to find 4 quotes and make 4 comments. I think if you do that, you're on a good footing to get as many marks as possible. So here's a little short paragraph that we're going to look at in terms of word choice and imagery. It was Freddie's connection with the audience that transformed that dilapidated soccer stadium into a sonic cathedral. In broad daylight, he majestically made 72,000 people his instrument, joining them in harmonious unison. Now, I picked this extract because it's relatively short, and yes, you're going to see there are multiple examples of language within it that we can actually comment on in a meaningful way. And that's important. It'd be very easy for you to gloss over that, to pull out 1 or 2 words and then move on. But actually, by zooming in really kind of forensic detail, you can find an awful lot to comment on, as long as you comment on each thing separately. So here are the examples of word choice that I picked out: transformed, dilapidated, majestically, and the phrase at the end, harmonious unison. So here are those 4 examples of word choice then: transformed, dilapidated, majestically, and harmonious unison. As I said before, generally speaking, in word choice, you need to be very focused in your analysis, very forensic. And ideally, you want to be looking at word choice at individual words and their specific connotations. It is acceptable, however, sometimes to use a short phrase, particularly if dividing that phrase up would be less effective. So if we look at the phrase harmonious unison, really harmonious on its own, unison on its own, we could maybe get away with something, but the phrase harmonious unison, that really is the important idea that we most want to analyze. Now, before I get into actually explaining the connotations of each of these, if you'd like to have a go, you can pause the video and have a think about each of these words. What are the connotations of that word, and why are they important in the context of the article and the point that Dave Grohl is trying to make? So transformed then, that has connotations of change at a fundamental level. So that's suggesting that Freddie's relationship with his fans was powerful enough to profoundly change the very nature of the building. Okay, the arena that they're playing in has been transformed. It has been profoundly changed just by how strong a relationship Freddie has forged with his fans. Next, dilapidated. So dilapidated has connotations of neglect and disrepair, and that suggests that without Queen performing there, the stadium was somehow squalid or unappealing, just a tired old sports arena. And then obviously it's become something that is not dilapidated through the quality of their performance. Next, we've got the word majestically. Now that has connotations of royalty. Okay, that's Her Majesty. Now this suggests that there was something perhaps noble or wondrous about Freddie's actions. Now, it's also worth noting that as word choice, this is quite apposite because his band's name is Queen. So describing somebody playing in the band Queen as being majestically, as having a certain majesty about them, is quite appropriate. And again, I've put in brackets there, detailed and insightful, because this is perhaps the kind of comment, if you made that second little aside about it being strengthened by the fact that the band's name is Queen, so it's kind of reminding you about that idea of royalty, then you might get a detailed and insightful mark for that. And here's another example of a potentially detailed and insightful comment then on the phrase harmonious unison. Now this phrase has connotations of multiple voices blending together into a single greater whole. And that's suggesting that Freddie reforged a crowd of disparate individuals into a single greater entity, their voices and consciousnesses blending together. Now, obviously it would be possible to make a more basic comment on harmonious unison, but I wanted to demonstrate perhaps what a more detailed and insightful comment might look for. I've taken the connotations of this phrase, the idea of all these separate voices blending together, and the implication therefore that beforehand they were very separate, very disparate, and the idea that he's made them something better, harmonious unison. So that's word choice. Now it's time for us to maybe look at the examples of imagery within this. And again, even though we've already found 4 really good examples of word choice, there are also 2 distinct metaphors inside here as well. We have the phrase a sonic cathedral, that's one metaphor, and made 72,000 people his instrument is the second metaphor. So first of all, I absolutely love this metaphor. It's one of my favourite metaphors in the article. A sonic cathedral, comparing the arena where the gig was occurring to a cathedral. A cathedral is a large and impressive building. It's a holy site. It's important to Christians, and it's a site of great spiritual significance. In the same way, the stadium where the Queen gig took place has a profound spiritual significance to the concert goers, suggesting it is more important than mere entertainment. Okay, so I've gone through that imagery analysis process. I've identified what is being compared to what. The arena is being compared to a cathedral, and then I've said, well, okay, if we look at a cathedral, what does a cathedral represent? Why is a cathedral significant? And then in what way is the arena that's being compared to a cathedral like a cathedral? Okay, so cathedral is large, it's impressive, it's a holy site, it's important to Christians, and it's a place of great spiritual significance. And in the same way, the big stadium where they're playing their gig has a profound spiritual significance to the concert goers. It's more important than just entertainment. It's something like really fundamentally, spiritually important to them. And here's the second metaphor, made 72,000 people his instrument. So here we're comparing the crowd singing along with Freddie to a musical instrument that he's playing. Just as a musician can manipulate their instrument to produce music, so Freddie is able to control the audience, making them sing according to his wishes, producing music from the audience every bit as authentic and skillful as that of the band on stage. Okay. Crucially, we've got the core idea there that an instrument is played with intent, with agency. So Freddie is deliberately doing something to make the audience respond in a particular way. So he is controlling them, he is manipulating them, he is influencing them, and what they are producing is music, like you would get from a musical instrument. So next up, we're going to look at sentence structure, and this is the first one that kind of leapt out at me, really. Well, things have changed. It's obviously a short sentence, but it also stands on its own as a paragraph as well. So it also is an aspect of paragraph structure too. And the brevity of that sentence and that paragraph conveys the shock that everybody, including Grohl, is feeling at having their plans cancelled due to the pandemic. Okay, so things are going along. He's writing. Well, things have changed. Okay, abrupt, short, sharp shock. Okay, disruption, surprise, something like that. Here's another example of sentence structure. You've got questions and there's also ellipses in the middle of it. When you take away the pyrotechnics and confetti of an arena rock concert, what are you left with? Just people? And the questions and the ellipses then, they suggest that Grohl is uncertain or surprised to see these legendary performers as mere human beings, just like him, like you, like me, like everyone else. Okay, a slightly longer extract here. I'm going to read this out. See if you can identify what's interesting about this in terms of sentence structure. Don't get me wrong, I can deal with the monotony and limited cuisine of quarantine. My lasagna game is on point, and I know that those of us who don't have to work in hospitals or deliver packages are the lucky ones. But still, I'm hungry for a big old plate of sweaty, ear-shredding, live rock and roll ASAP. The kind that makes your heart race, your body move, and your soul stir with passion. So there we go. My lasagna game is on point. In parenthesis there, we've also then got I'm hungry for a big old plate of sweaty, ear-shredding, live rock and roll, ASAP. And then the kind that makes your heart race, your body move, and your soul stir with passion. First up, we've got the parenthesis then. My lasagna game is on point, and the parenthesis is used to insert a humorous aside, like a little joke, off to one side. It shows that Dave Grohl has a human side, and it contrasts with the rest of the paragraph, which becomes less mundane and more profound. So as the paragraph goes on, he ends up talking about souls and things like that. So a little gag about how he's making lots of lasagna when he's at home is very much at odds with that. But it does establish his humanity, which, if you think back to what we did when we were looking at the big picture and our 5-5-1 process, that is sort of the fundamental point of this article, isn't it? That he's human, his audience are human, his idols are human, we're all human, and we're all connected through the experience of live music. So including a little humorous thing like that, it's just another connection with his reader, showing his humanity. So next, this one. Hungry for a big old plate of sweaty, ear-shredding, live rock and roll, ASAP. So here we've got a list of adjectives which are describing what he is missing about music, and that emphasizes all of these important details, highlighting just how much he misses them. Okay, it's also worth noting this is also a metaphor. Okay, when he's talking about how he wants a plate of live music, and that also is a humorous continuation of his earlier comment about lasagna. So you could talk about both language and sentence structure, and it's worth noting if you talk about this as a list and the effect of that list kind of emphasizing all of the things that he's missing about live music, and then you also commented on the metaphor about the idea of him eating it up just like he was eating the lasagna because he's bored of what he's eating at home and he wants instead to be experiencing live music out in the world. You would get 2 marks for that. You would get a mark for the sentence structure and then a separate mark for the metaphor. And we've got another list here, albeit a slightly different one. Your heart race, your body move, and your soul stir with passion. So again, the list is emphasizing all of the different ways that we respond to live music. It escalates, though, growing larger in scope, from heart to body to soul, okay, building to that final climactic phrase. The sense of escalation there, heart to body to soul. Now, before we move on to step 4, it's worth noting there are many, many other examples of language features in there, and you should absolutely feel free to go and analyze them. There's good examples of word choice, good imagery, good sentence structure you can analyze and annotate there, and I would encourage you to do so. The more you practice these skills on your own, the better you're going to get. Now, this final step, evaluating, where we can weigh up how effectively something has been done, is probably the trickiest of all of the kind of processes that we're practicing. It also is the one that in your actual exam, there generally speaking is only one question is actually explicitly asking you to evaluate. Okay, so if you focus on getting the big ideas, on paraphrasing using your own words as far as possible, and on analyzing language and structure, those are the core skills that are most important. Okay, but there will always be at least one question asking you to evaluate something, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here. So the reason evaluation is so tricky is because it involves you tying together everything else. Okay, reading for understanding, analysis, and evaluation. Well, to evaluate, you need to be able to understand and analyze as well. All right, so to be able to evaluate how well or how effective something is, you need to be able to understand what the writer's point or purpose is. There's no way you can answer a question, how effective a conclusion is it to his key ideas in the article, if you don't know what his key ideas are in the article. So you must understand. Secondly, you have to be able to analyze how they have tried to achieve it. Okay, you need to know what it means to be an effective conclusion or an effective introduction. And then finally, you can evaluate how well they have actually done it, but you cannot do that without being able to understand and analyze first. Okay, now the majority of evaluation questions in our UAE tend to target introductions or conclusions. That's not to say they only will ever target introductions or conclusions. They may target another particular paragraph. They may have a slightly different slant on what they're asking you to evaluate. But more often than not, it's introductions and conclusions. So if you're looking to test yourself on evaluation, that's the easiest thing to do. Look at the beginning of an article, look at the end of an article, and evaluate why it's an effective beginning or why it's an effective conclusion. Okay, now one brief aside on evaluation. Obviously, you're being asked to evaluate how well something has been done. Does that mean that you could say that they have done it badly? Well, yes, you probably could. And certainly if you can make a compelling argument as to why something they have done has made it less effective, then that absolutely could work. A good example of that, if you look back at one of the SQA past papers that looked at whether 16-year-olds could get the vote, if you look at the second article, which isn't actually analysed for language or evaluated, it's simply used for the final question where you compare key ideas. But it's written by a woman who believes that 16-year-olds shouldn't get the vote, and she speaks in quite a condescending tone about teenagers. Now, it would be absolutely valid for you to read that article and go, well, that's a teenager. I didn't find that very effective because you seem to be talking down to me, and that made me quite angry. So that would be a valid example of a critical evaluative comment. But 99% of the time, it is easier for you to just say that somebody has done something effectively, because ultimately the exam board wouldn't choose an article for an exam unless they thought it was a good piece of writing. And I wouldn't choose an article for one of these guided analysis videos if I didn't think it was a good piece of writing. So there must be something quality there. So it's about finding what was the writer's purpose, what have they done to actually achieve that, how did they do that, and then how well did that all come together. So here's the conclusion. In today's world of fear and unease and social distancing, it's hard to imagine sharing experiences like these ever again. I don't know when it will be safe to return to singing arm in arm at the top of our lungs, hearts racing, bodies moving, souls bursting with life. But I do know that we will do it again because we have to. It's not a choice. We're human. We need moments that reassure us that we are not alone, that we are understood, that we are imperfect, and most important, that we need each other. I have shared my music, my words, my life with the people who come to our shows, and they have shared their voices with me. Without that audience, that screaming, sweating audience, my songs would only be sound. But together, we are instruments in a sonic cathedral, one that we build together, night after night, and one that we will surely build again. So, before I move on to my evaluation of this, you might want to pause the video and just have a look at that again and think about, okay, what is it about this that's effective? And remember, we're looking both at the ideas and we're looking at the language that he's used. And in particular, it's a conclusion. So a conclusion's job is to wrap everything up, to kind of bring together all the different things he's talked about in the article, to summarize it, and to leave the reader thinking about what the most important idea is. So what callbacks are there in this conclusion to earlier parts of the article? Okay, in what way does he neatly or effectively summarize or state his really important ideas at the end? How does he use language to convey the important point that he's trying to make to us? So to summarize then, what is the purpose of his conclusion? Well, it's to make the reader feel hope or feel confident that live music will return again. It's to remind us that the shared experience of live music is something important, something fundamental to the human experience, and it's to express his love and his respect for his fans. So how successfully has he done that? How successfully has he made the reader feel hope or feel confident that live music will return again? How effective has he been in reminding us that live music is important, that there is something fundamental about that shared experience? And has he effectively conveyed his love and his respect for his fans? Well, yes, I obviously think he did do it pretty successfully. Otherwise, I wouldn't have picked this article for you guys to read. I think it leaves it on a very optimistic note. I think it's very powerful. I think it's quite moving. I think he does call back to a lot of his key ideas. I think he very neatly sums it up. And he leaves me at the end feeling a lot of love from Dave Grohl. But of course, while you do have to make that evaluative judgment, yes, it is effective. You don't get any marks just for saying yes. You then need to explain why it's effective. That's where your marks come from. So one of the key ways in which a conclusion is effective is because it returns the key ideas. And you'll see that I've highlighted some of the key ideas or the references rather within this paragraph that relate back to key ideas that have been expressed earlier in the article. And I'm going to go through and explain each of these key ideas. Okay, so here are those four very clear, explicit links back to earlier ideas and motifs from earlier in the passage. Fear and unease and social distancing, well, that's linked back to the introduction of the article, to the context of the pandemic, under which he wrote his article, and indeed which I'm recording this video, at a point when people are feeling uncertain about what's going to happen in the future, and because of social distancing, live music is not something that we can actually engage in right now. Secondly, we've got singing arm in arm at the top of our lungs, which is a reference back to him singing along with complete strangers when he's in a crowd watching gigs himself. We've then got the list, hearts racing, bodies moving, souls bursting, which is repeating the earlier list about the impact of live music. And then finally, but together we are instruments in a sonic cathedral, which contains references back to the two metaphors he used when he's describing Freddie Mercury, the sonic cathedral and the fact that we're all instruments being played, when he talked about Freddie Mercury playing the 72,000 people like an instrument. So those are four key ideas that are very explicitly referred back to. Next, we want to look at the language that he's actually used and why the language he used in the conclusion is effective. So here you can see I've highlighted some of the language features I think are important. There are others. Again, there's a lot of language features you could analyze here in the conclusion, but I've sort of picked out some of the key ones, some of the ones that I think are particularly important. And here they are. First of all, it's not a choice, we're human. Short sentences which really emphasize these stark truths, suggesting that they are inarguably true. Okay, he's not trying to kind of express something in a long and complicated way. He's just stating it clearly, directly, simply. It's not a choice, we're human. Secondly, we need moments that reassure us we're not alone, that we're understood, that we're imperfect, and most important, that we need each other. So you've got parallel structure there, you might call that an aphora, that repeated phrase that we are not alone, that we are understood, that we are imperfect, and most important, that we need each other. So again, that emphasizes just how much we need live music. Okay, we then have, I have shared my music, my words, my life with the people who come to our shows, and they have shared their voices with me. We've got balanced sentence structure there, which strengthens a connection between Grohl and his audience. This is a two-way connection. He has shared with his fans, and his fans have shared with him. And that fundamental human connection, we go back to that one word that I said was the most important way of sort of summarizing the central point of this article, the connection between Grohl and his audience, and that balanced sentence structure is expressing that. He has shared his music, his words, his life, and they have shared their voices with him. Both sides are giving, both sides are receiving. It's a connection. And then finally, that kind of climactic sentence, and one that we will surely build again, final climactic sentence that very clearly states his message. Live music will return. This video useful, this sort of guided analysis. What I was trying to do here was model for you the process that you can undertake yourself when you read a news article yourself. You should be looking for what are the central concerns, doing that 5-5-1 process, 5 sentences, 5 words, then 1 word to really get to the essence of what the article is all about. Then you should be picking at least one paragraph that contains some information, some ideas he's trying to express, and summarize those ideas using your own words as far as possible. And then you should be looking for examples of language feature through the article, and again trying to find examples of word choice, of imagery, and of sentence structure. There are other things you could look at, but I think if you hit those big 3, word choice, imagery, sentence structure, you're covering most of your bases. And then finally, you might want to look at either the introduction or the conclusion and evaluate how effective it is.